The following is a presentation of WVUA Sport.
And we're off. The college football season kicked off this weekend in Atlanta for the Crimson Tide with a 33-23 win over West Virginia in the Chick-fil-A game. The Tide remains undefeated in that game, now 3-0. You get the idea. Alabama likes the season kicking off in the ATL. And good evening, everybody. Welcome into Tider Insider TV, presented each and every week by Buffalo Rock. Alongside Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com, I'm Gary Harris. Ice Cold Pepsi next tonight. As I told you last week, Rod, the good folks at Buffalo Rock brought me about 4 or 5 cases of Pepsi next, so we're set. The thing is, I have to make sure during the week I don't drink them all up before we get to the show. They're so good. Pick up some Pepsi next. The next time you're at your local grocery store, all that great Pepsi taste, 2/3 less calories than regular Pepsi, only 60 calories per 12-ounce can. Well, tonight we've got football and more football to get to. We're breaking down every part of this game that's coming up and talking about the one that we played this past weekend against West Virginia. And we're going to start with that, Rodney, recapping the win over the Mountaineers, 33-23. Your initial reaction to what you saw at the Georgia Dome this past Saturday?
Well, I mean, obviously you want to just get out with a win. That's the first and foremost thing. You look at so many teams around the country, Gary, who struggled in their first game. You know, I think Alabama obviously had their difficulties, but there were some bright spots. First of all, the kicking game. How about Adam Griffith and J.K. Scott? Both did an outstanding job in their first real games. You know, defensively, they struggled a little bit. There you see Bradley Silva. He gave up a couple of throws. He was in position, didn't make the plays a couple of times. So obviously they need to improve some defensively. On the flip side of that, look at Blake Sims. I thought he did a really nice job on his first starting debut. You know, he made some key throws, made some clutch throws. So I thought the offensive line performed a little bit better than maybe expected overall. So offensively, I thought they played pretty well.
You know, Rod, a lot of people said, well, West Virginia was 4-8 a year ago. That was last year. They've got big-time athletes. And Nick Saban said, despite the perception, this game went down just the way he thought it would.
Well, you know, first of all, I thought this game was going to be exactly like it was. I really thought West Virginia had a lot better team than anybody thought. And like you all do, which I love you for doing it, is you create perceptions. All right, so your perception is we're really good and they're not so good. So we're going to come into this game and everybody's expectation is it's going to be a one-sided, lopsided game. And I never thought that at all.
And here are some notes from the game. Rodney, as you said, Blake Sims really performed pretty well. 250 yards, only 1 pick, completed 73% of his passes. And, you know, one way to gauge a quarterback is what does he do on third down? How about 9 of 16, including one late in that game, a 7-yard slant to Chris Black when it was only a 10-point game with about 4 minutes to go, and Alabama did not want to punt that ball back to West Virginia. That kept the drive alive. They burned off some more clock and clinched the game. 538 yards of total offense, well balanced, 288 rushing, 250 through the air. You know, it's one of those games, again, where I think a lot of people are disappointed because they're looking at what West Virginia did last year when they had a miserable season. But they had injuries, and I'm not saying they're going to play for the national championship, but I saw them in person. Let me tell you something. They got some athletes. And on the perimeter, I'm not so sure they weren't faster than Alabama. I think you have to give their football team some credit instead of just bashing Alabama.
You do, but we talked about all week last week and even before that this is a really young Alabama team in a lot of key spots. And, you know, there could be some bumps in the road a little bit. And I think maybe defensively, when you look at Trey DePriest being out, they didn't have the signal caller there. You know, Reuben Foster, Reggie Ragland getting their first real, you know, test inside. You know, maybe they struggled a little bit at times. There was a lot of confusion. Coach Saban admitted that, and I think that maybe lent to a lot of the defensive problems.
Well, what about the balance on offense, though, that I alluded to earlier? Amari Cooper over 100 yards in receiving. DeAndre White had 73 yards when he went out with an injury. Both the running backs, Henry and Yeldon, over 100 yards. So, I mean, the offensive line, as the Tide pushed it between the tackles with the run game, certainly something to build off there offensively, I thought.
I think you're definitely right. I mean, the offensive line, when you look at Cameron Robinson, the true freshman who we've talked all summer about starting at left tackle, I thought he did an outstanding job there. No question about that. In his first start, you saw Leon Brown and Shank Taylor both performing at that right guard spot, and I think Leon had a few penalties, but overall, you know, the offensive line really played well, and you talked about the balance. You had two running backs over 100 yards, Yeldon and Henry, and then, you know, we talked about the receivers and all that production, but I thought it was really good. And you know, I still think they've got more weapons that they didn't use. Obviously, Drake didn't get in the game a lot. I think O.J. Howard's going to become more of a weapon as we move down the stretch. So I think there's still some things, as you mentioned, that can improve and build on.
And defensively, Trickett did torch him, 365 yards passing. We alluded to Bradley Sylvie. He had a lot of problems in that game. Wouldn't be shocked if he's not the starting cornerback come this Saturday. But Alabama did hold West Virginia to 28 yards rushing on 24 carries. And the Tide came out of the game in pretty good shape injury-wise, but not completely. A couple of key injuries that we learned more about on Monday. DeAndrew White, who was having a great game before being injured. On this great throw by Sims, he makes the grab, but he comes down hard on his shoulder. He has a separated shoulder, and he's expected to miss a couple of weeks. And even more serious is Jarrett Williams, the starting star, who fractured a bone in his foot and will miss at least 4 weeks, and that's a blow to a struggling secondary. Eddie Jackson, as we said, may be pressed into action soon because he's cleared to play and could play star and or cornerback. There is the complete injury report. Again, the good news on Eddie Jackson, though, is that he could be back soon, Rodney, beginning with this week. In fact, today at practice, in the media viewing period, he was running with Cyrus Jones as one of the starting corners.
Interesting. And, you know, Gary, it also gives an opportunity. Obviously, Geno Smith's had a lot of experience. He's played at that star spot. Maurice Smith is another guy that's been working there. It's a young sophomore who's been, you know, a guy that really was highly recruited player, and so he's kind of going to maybe have an opportunity to work in as well. It's good to see that some of these guys, some of the younger guys, are going to have some opportunities. Maybe we'll see Tony Brown and Marlon Humphrey this weekend.
All right, you move on to the home opener, 11 a.m. Saturday morning against Florida Atlantic. The Owls from down in South Florida. I don't know what to say. They're not really good. They got beat 55-7 by Nebraska, gave up nearly 800 yards of offense. Abdur Abdullah, the running back from Homewood High School, torched them for over 200 yards rushing. You know, Rodney, it is what it is, and this is a game where Alabama should be able to play a lot of different people and look at a lot of different combinations.
Well, you'd sure hope so. And again, I think it's also an opportunity too, though, you know, with so many young guys, Gary, that played a lot last week, it's also an opportunity for them to get a lot more experience. People talk about playing some of the younger players. Well, the truth is, a lot of the guys that played last week are the younger players. You know, but I do understand exactly what you mean, getting younger players in the game, maybe some of the freshmen, as we mentioned, Tony Brown, Marlon Humphrey, maybe Rashawn Evans. Deshaun Hand played quite a bit in the second half at defensive end last Saturday. So, again, I think it's going to be an opportunity for, as you said, a lot of guys to get opportunities.
We do know this. Nick Saban's not taking them for granted. That's for sure.
It doesn't really have anything to do with who you're playing. It has everything to do with who you are, all right, and how you respond to the challenge of going out and doing the things that we need to do to improve and play better. And we're not where we need to be. We're not the team that we can be. If we're playing against Michael Jordan, we play our best game. But if we're playing against just another old basketball player, then we play just like another old basketball player. Is that your thinking on this? Because it's not mine. All right, so, and if it's our players' thinking, I can tell you right now, I'm going to be pretty pissed about it.
All right. Here are some notes. Alabama won the first meeting between these two clubs a couple of years ago. The Tides won 13 straight home openers going back to 2001. Saban 7-0 in home openers at Alabama in the last regular season non-conference loss. You got to go all the way back to 2007 when Monroe shocked the Tide here at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Well, when we come back on Tider Insider TV, we'll talk further about this Crimson Tide team, including that 1-2 combo of running backs that could be, Rodney, the best in the nation. We'll also get a little deeper into the offense and defensive analysis after game one. Where does this team need to improve on both sides of the football? That's coming up. And also, we'll be welcoming your phone calls, 205-348-WVUA. That's 348-9882. Email us at the address on your screen. And we love tweets, so hashtag Tider Insider TV if you want to send us a question or comment that way. We'll be back with more of the show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide. Tider Insider Television right after this. Well, something that was very encouraging on Saturday was watching T.J. Yeldon and Derrick Henry rack up some impressive numbers running between the tackles against West Virginia. A big-time game from both backs. They'll spell double trouble for a lot of opponents this year. Here's a look inside The numbers, Yeldon with 126 yards on 23 carries. He's just under 1,100 yards from breaking Sean Alexander's all-time rushing mark, so it could happen. It's a very reachable goal for him. Bama rushed for 5.9 yards per carry in the game. And you see what Henry did as well. Less carries, nearly as many yards. So when you look at these guys, Rod, they are, you know, they're a dose of bad medicine for the opponent. And we didn't even mention Kenyon Drake, whose role is going to increase going forward.
Yeah, and Yeldon had a 25-yard run called back.
That's
Don't
right.
forget that. So, again, yeah, they're a dynamic duo. I mean, when you look at these guys, you know, obviously both of them can run between the tackles. They have some speed, obviously, that. And when you talk about the third guy, Kenyon Drake, I mean, the explosiveness he adds, Gary, is going to be another dimension.
And the job Lane Kiffin did his first as offensive coordinator from the sidelines.
Yeah, I thought when you looked at him, it looked like he was very much under control, and I think he did a good job of settling the offensive guys down, especially Blake Sims. You know, you could see him really working him from the sideline, so I thought he did a great job of managing that.
All right, let's take a look at the Tide's offensive numbers. And again, you know, pretty impressive. The one turnover, and that was a ball, quite frankly, that looked like it was predetermined. They were going to try to get it to O.J. Howard. I thought maybe Amari Cooper could have pushed his route on down the field to keep the corner from coming off of him, because it was the corner, not the safety, that made the pick. As Cooper stopped running and he came off of him. But still, I thought Sims managed the game. The players, Rodney, for the most part, pleased after the West Virginia contest, but they admitted that there's definitely a lot to improve on.
I believe Blake did a great job. You know, we won, and that's great. That's the objective, and you know, he has a lot of things that he can improve in, as I do, as we do as a team. There's always things you can improve in.
All right, Rod, let's move on to the defense, and that is where the critics are having some fun, because after the last two games of last season and all the talk in the offseason about how this defense was going to be different, they were going to get after the quarterback, they weren't going to give up the big plays in the passing game against these hurry-up, no-huddle offenses and tempo teams, and as we said, Trickett lit them up pretty good. 365 yards passing, no interceptions. They did get some pressure. Bradley Sylvie had a tough day, so a lot of folks are saying, same old, same old. You play the tempo offense, Alabama can't stop you.
It's the first game. And I mean, when you look at how many young guys they have, you had a lot of new guys. Obviously, you had some guys up front. That DJ Petway's been around, but, you know, he just transferred back into the program, Jaron Reed. You had the young guys at linebacker. As we talked about the confusion, they were calling one thing for the front. The secondary was doing something else. So there was some confusion there. I mean, that happens sometimes when you have a lot of young guys, a lot of guys that don't have experience. So, again, I think we need to wait and kind of evaluate things as they go along.
All right, let's take a look at the numbers. In fairness, we will point out, as you saw, that 23 points, but only 16 given up by the defense. A 100-yard kickoff return was produced 7 of those points. And in the rushing total, of course, the sack yardage comes off of that, but to hold them to 28 yards on 24 carries, and most of that came in the first quarter. But, Rodney, they did not force any turnovers, and that's an area where they need to pick it up a little bit.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, I thought it was good to see the way the defensive, the front especially, started slowing down the run a little bit later on as the game went along. It seemed like they played better. I think, you know, it's going to be an area where it's going to be a real strength as we get towards the middle part of the season. All
right, Cyrus Jones had a pretty good ball game at that corner opposite Sylvie, and he said that he knew everything wasn't going to be perfect, but he's looking forward to this defense continuing to improve.
I think it being the first game, you kind of expect mistakes here and there, but obviously we just trying to move forward and keep getting better as the weeks progress. And like Coach said, we're not going to pretty much dwell too much on this game. We're just going to keep on moving forward and getting better.
And much more to come here on TITV. We'll check in on the first national polls of the season when we come back. And next, we'll be welcoming your phone calls, emails, and tweets. You see the information on the screen on how you can interact with Tider Insider TV. We encourage you to get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. We'll be right back with the only show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide. The award-winning Tider Insider TV is coming back after this. No change in the polls this week, despite the fact that some thought Alabama might fall from that number 2 spot. The Tide did not. Alabama remains number 2. Florida State remains number 1. And Alabama did manage to pick up a first-place vote in the Associated Press Top 25 polls. All right, Rod, let's head to the Med Center hotline. They are lined up for us, including our good buddy John in Bessemer. Hey, John, what's going on, man?
What's going on, man?
Hey, you know it. Tell me.
Hey, man, I called to tell you about, man, our defense don't look so good. It looks sloppy.
Well,
man, Alabama, they do better than they did Saturday, man.
All right, John. Well, they're going to work to tighten it up. That's what Rodney and I have been talking about. But, you know, as you pointed out, they had a brand-new starting cornerback, 2 brand-new linebackers. Their signal caller was out of the game. Some new defensive linemen, so you can't expect to be perfect in the first game, but clearly there's room for improvement.
Oh, yeah. You know, and I think we ran through that, John. And, you know, one thing about it we've seen from Nick Saban's teams, they generally do progress as the season goes along, especially on defense. So I don't think that there should be, you know, too much concern at this point. All
right. Thanks, John and Bessemer, for the phone call. Let's move over to Cordova and talk to John Max. Hey, John Max, how are you?
Good. My question is from a standpoint on what do you think our quarterback needs to do to improve, and how do you think he played that game?
Well, I thought he played pretty well. Again, I know he's caught some criticism. He did miss a couple of wide open throws, but my goodness, he hit Christian Jones in the hands for what would have been a 50-yard game, possibly even a touchdown. And Christian Jones, ran a little button hook and dropped another ball. So, I mean, when you complete 73% of your passes, you throw for 250 yards, you pick up 42 yards on the ground, and you convert some critical third downs in the game, and you only throw 1 interception. Yeah, he can improve, but maybe I'm in the minority. I thought he played a pretty good ball game.
Well, for your first start, I think he certainly did. And I mean, he put up some really good numbers. He almost had 300 yards of offense. I mean, I really don't know or understand why anyone would complain with his performance in the first game. I thought he did an outstanding job. The one thing I'd like to see him do, and it's just from a standpoint of enjoying watching it, is when you see he's pretty smooth when he pulls that ball down and runs. I'd like to see him run, a little bit more. I know that's not really what they do, but it's good to see him run.
All right, Coach Saban, though, making a point this week to say that the quarterback competition is ongoing, and we expect to see Jacob Coker a lot this week against Florida Atlantic. All right, Plato and Panorama. What's up, Plato?
Good evening, guys. I want to talk about a lot has been said after the game about the inside linebackers' ability to make the right calls and get the defense in position. And I know with this staff, as opposed to, like, say, Coach Bryant's staff tends to play their starters more during the season than substituting liberally. Do you think that has an effect, especially in the early games when you have to replace veteran players that have moved on?
Okay, Plato, we got you. They need to play some more players at the inside linebacker position, you think?
Well, I mean, it depends the situation. If you have the guys that are ready to play and that can be in the game, yeah. But I mean, I think sometimes, in some situations they haven't had that opportunity, in the past. So again, I think when you look at these guys they have now, certainly they're guys that are going to develop as time goes on. They're outstanding athletes. Gary, they were all highly recruited and guys that are still, trying to learn.
All right, thanks for the phone calls. More coming up on Tider Insider Television, including a strong performance from the Alabama specialist. We'll see how one member of that unit has already been honored. And more of your phone calls, emails, and tweets. So if you haven't gotten through yet, keep on trying. We will try to get you on here in the next block. This is the show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide, the one, the only, Tider Insider Television. We already knew Adam Griffith had talent. If you've watched him in high school, you knew that. And even that 57-yard attempt against Auburn last year, he hit it well. Well, on Saturday, all he did was go 4 for 4, most of them from long range. And he's already been named the SEC Special Teams Player of the Week, as well as a Lou Groza Star of the Week for his efforts against the Mountaineers. All right, let's head back to the phone lines, and let's talk to David in Tuscaloosa. Hey, David, how are you?
Roll Tide, Gary. It's good to see you and talk to you again here at East Edge Apartments. And, wow, what a game. I think that we played very well on offense. I think the defense, though, I watched, not only did I watch our game, I watched what Texas A&M did to South Carolina, and I know that we have them as an opponent in the next several weeks or so. We got some time to get ready for them, but they've got a good hurry-up offense, and we need to work on our hurry-up defense as well, especially with teams like that who have a major hurry-up offense they're known for. Otherwise, we're going to have a lot of trouble beating these guys. I mean, after what they did to South Carolina, I mean, we're really going to have, without I mean, even without Johnny Football, they're
good. You know, David,
they're not playing as different.
That's right. You make great points. And one thing I want to be fair to Alabama on, though, is Alabama has struggled against some of these teams. A lot of people struggle against them. You know, we can't judge Alabama differently than we do other teams. Alabama has been one of the best defenses in the country, but, you know, these teams run a lot of plays. They speed up the game. They're going to get some yards and some points. It's just kind of the way the game's played now.
Some of these teams, yes, they have struggled against, but, you know, like Texas A&M, obviously they lost 2 years ago, but they were within a play of winning that game. A&M only scored 9 points after the first quarter. You know, last year they did beat Texas A&M. Alabama had a lot of inexperience on the field with the corners. You remember that, some injuries. So, again, they have struggled against these hurry-up, no-huddle teams, and I promise you, I agree with what he says. You know, when you look at Texas A&M, they do look like a team that would concern you.
Yeah, they're working hard, David, to get better. All right, let's go real quickly to Carrollton and talk to RW. RW, we've got just a short period of time. What's up?
Yeah, just a comment about Blake Sims.
Okay.
If you know, I think he played pretty well. If Coker would have played the whole game, had the same stats, we'd probably be talking Heisman Trophy right now. So I think Coach Saban doing a good job and playing the best guy. Roll Tide.
Yeah, RW, perceptions of a lot of how we view things. And you're right, Coker put up the same numbers. Fans might have been rejoicing. Hey, who knows?
Yeah, and I really don't understand why.
All right. When we come back, it's time to make our predictions for this week's game. Will one of us pick an upset? No, I don't think so.
Not me.
I can't hold your attention with that. Diner Insider TV is coming right back. A beautiful evening in Tuscaloosa. Please stay with us. All right, Rod, is Florida Atlantic ready to shock the world? I guess not, huh?
Well, there's your scores. I guess not. Alabama 45-6.
Well, we both think the Owls will score. How about that? 45-6 and 52-6. We like the Tide to roll over Florida Atlantic, and going to get to see a lot of those young guys take the football field on Saturday. All right, that's going to just about do it for our program. Before we get out of here, we want to thank the Locker Room, located on the University Strip, a Tuscaloosa tradition since 1964, for outfitting us an original elephant wear. Check them out in person or online. You can catch a replay of the show tonight at 10:30, or you can catch it anytime on our website. For Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. Thanks for watching, everybody. Good night from Tuscaloosa.